Hi everyone. Some of these mistakes still make me cringe. You need to know what I'm about to share. These are the 5 worst mistakes I've made in my garden, and trust me, they've cost me. You don't need to go through the same pain I did. Let's jump in. The first mistake I've made is misjudging sunlight. Now, perfect example here with my tomatoes. Last year, they got about 8 hours of sunlight a day. But this year, I misjudged it. The trees have grown. They're only getting about 4 hours. Now, I know you're thinking they might look good, but I really thought they would be way up here by now. These were planted about 2 months ago, and they're only about waist high. So what I did to fix this is I kept an eye on the rest of the hill, the hours of sunlight that it was getting, and I planted tomatoes right up here on the second and third level. These were planted a good month after the first ones, and look at the difference in growth. They're already taller, more about a foot or so taller than the first ones. This third level here was planted another month later than the second level. They're growing super vigorously, get about 8 to 10 hours of sunlight a day, and I know I'm going to get the most from these 2 levels. So definitely pay attention to the sun patterns in your garden and plant your vegetables that need a lot of sun in the sunniest spots. Now, another example of this is down here in the garden nook. This is a partial shaded area. Gets morning sun, afternoon shade. Last year, I had a raised bed in here that I hardly got anything out of because I planted the wrong vegetables. So this year I fixed that by adjusting the vegetables I'm growing. These are partial shade vegetables that do well in about 4 hours of sunlight a day. And look at how it's thriving. A lot more harvest, they look a lot more green, more vigorous, and I'm really glad I fixed this mistake this year. The second massive mistake I've made is waiting too long to harvest. Now, I waited too long to harvest in hopes that the fruit or vegetable would get bigger and bigger. My cucumbers and squash got way too oversized. All the work I did to grow them for nothing. Now that's painful. What actually happens is when you let your vegetables get oversized, especially your cucumbers and your squash, they turn into big baseball bat size cucumbers and squash, and then they get yellow and really seedy. They don't taste good. And when they get seedy, it actually sends a signal to the plant to stop producing. So this cucumber is actually the perfect size. It's about 4 inches long, kind of hiding back here. If I waited a couple of more days to harvest it, I would definitely be making that mistake again. So now what I do is I take a 10-minute walk around my garden daily, check under the leaves, see what needs harvesting so my vegetables don't stop producing. And I've got lots of veggies every day to harvest. Beautiful. The next mistake is waiting too long to trellis. And this one is very painful, and I bet you've done this one too. I've got a bad example of this right here and also a good example that I've done right. But let me show you the bad example first. These are some runner beans or some pole beans, and I haven't cut them trellised yet. And look at the jungle that this is. Now the plant looks really good, but it is just sprawling everywhere. And where is this plant gonna go? I mean, right now it's starting to wrap its way around my pepper cages. Pretty soon it's gonna shade out my peppers. And now I've really got a problem on my hands because it's gonna be really hard to unwrap these beans. They're really getting out of hand from my pepper trellises and figure out a way to trellis them up. So they're going to be sprawling everywhere, a big mess. Pretty soon pests and disease could take over. They might not be very productive. So the big fix for this one, and a huge lesson I learned, is to trellis from the very beginning. Now over here, I've got a spot with some runner beans where I've done this. As they've grown, I've woven them up through this trellis. I've actually trimmed some branches down here so they wouldn't shade out these lettuces. And look how beautifully they're growing. They look gorgeous. The flowers are growing really well. There's lots of little beans starting to come on. And it's just a much more manageable plant. Now, another plant that is super easy to get out of hand before you have a chance to trellis it is squash. So right back here in the red planter area, I've got some vining squash, butternut, and spaghetti squash, but they got out of hand. This area was way overgrown. And before I trellised them, the vines were sprawled out all over the garden bed, shooting in every which direction. And it was very difficult to then take the plant after it was vining, weave it up through the trellis, tie it up, Branches were getting broken off. My little baby squash almost got broken off. So definitely do yourself a favor. Trellis your plants from the beginning, and as they grow, keep on trellising them up so you don't have the problem with broken vines, and you'll get a lot more production that way. I've definitely learned my lesson on this one. My next mistake is not installing drip irrigation at the time of planting. Now, not only does this take me so much extra time in dragging the hose around the garden or dragging watering cans around the garden, but the plants really suffer, and that's painful. Now, I switched over my whole entire garden this year from my old drip system, which didn't work very well, to my new Mr. Landscaper system. But I hadn't done this garden bed yet. And the plants were suffering, not to mention the fact that trying to unroll the drip irrigation hose after the plants were already growing, wow, it took me so much time. I can't even tell you guys. And it suffered with broken plants. I had to spend a lot of extra time on it, and it was so much harder. So the fix for this is install drip irrigation before I plant anything in that garden bed. So the soil is already nice and moist. The plants are getting the moisture they need from the get-go. It saves me so much time, and the plants are so much happier. The next mistake I've made in my garden is ignoring early pest damage signs. Now this one is huge and very painful, because if you ignore early signs of pest damage, like holes in your leaves or these leaf miners here, it can literally wipe out an entire crop. So here I've got some leaf miner damage. If I was to completely ignore this and not spray it with something like Monterey Garden Insect Spray that will soak down into the leaves and take care of these leaf miners, pretty soon my whole entire cucumber plant here would be damaged, covered with insects, and lost. Now, a few months ago, this mistake became painfully clear. We had a runner bean climbing up my tomato trellis, and I wasn't checking my garden daily, and I missed it, and all of a sudden I looked at it. It was absolutely infested with little tiny black aphids, to the point where it was absolutely disgusting. Now, we sprayed it and tried to save the plant. By then, it was way too far gone, and I ended up having to take it out, which was super disappointing. Lost my harvest on that plant. I had to take it out so I could protect my tomatoes from an aphid infestation. So don't make the same mistake I did. Check your garden daily and then spray before it gets too late with an organic product that will take care of the bugs quickly. Now, I know I can't be the only one that's made these mistakes. Let me know if you can relate to one of these, and hopefully this encouraged you and gave you some ideas on how to fix mistakes you've made in your garden. Thanks for watching. See you next time in the garden.